discuss about how you actually perform the passive leg raise test. Okay. The physiological premise of the passive leg raise is actually you are trying to move a good amount of fluid from the legs and from the splanchnic circulation into the chest. Okay, so if there is a movement of fluid that comes from the leg into the chest, the cardiac output should throw it out. When that occurs, by more than the cardiac output increases by more than 10%, we could say that the patient is fluid responsive. Now, the premise is that is this position the right? So it's important to know how to do the test. And to do the test, you need a high fidelity monitor. I mean to say there has to be a monitor that can detect a change, significant change, or at least 10%. If you cannot detect a change of 10%, it means that that monitor cannot detect it. Simple. So if the change, significant change, that is the least significant change, is less than 10%, the monitor will not work. If the least significant is less than 10%, the monitor will not work. So your least significant change in a pico monitor is 5 to 8%. So in your pico monitor that we have in this patient, you have a femoral line, you have a central line here, and what you see here is the pico reading that you're getting here. So you have pulse pressure variation, you have continuous cardiac output monitoring, CCI, that is continuous cardiac index, stroke index, and stroke volume. So you have the stroke volume and the continuous cardiac output monitor. Now this continuous cardiac output monitor is the one that is the one you need to have when you're doing passive leg raise. You cannot do passive leg raise using pulse pressure variation. You cannot do passive leg raise using blood pressure. You cannot do passive leg raise using CVP. It has to be flow. And the only monitor that gives you flow presently is the pico monitor that gives you flow. That's what the cardiac output tells you. The cardiac output tells you the flow. That is not what happens when you do any other monitoring. Any other monitoring is pressure. PPV is pulse pressure variation. BP is blood pressure. That's why you can do flow. The other way you can do flow is by echo. So when you can do an echo and a stroke volume, and then you prove that the stroke volume is going more than 10% high, you can still call it as cardiac output response. But as now you can understand how difficult it is to do an echo and then do this whole thing. Okay, so that's why the premise is you want to give a fluid challenge somewhere around 300 ml. That is the first thing. So that means to say our legs will have 150 ml of fluid. So where is the rest 150 coming? The rest 150 will come from the splanchnic circulation. Now the splanchnic circulation is actually the most important circulation, more than the legs. Why is that so important? Because of the fact that the splanchnic circulation is the biggest venous capacitance of our body. 70% of our blood volume lies in that. Okay, so venous capacitance is very high, it's a capacitor. So that's why compliance is also very, very low of the system. So it will hold a large amount of water. So this is one of the most important reservoirs that will move blood from here into the chest wall. This means to say, first the splanchnic reservoir should be activated. You cannot have, so this position, if you say, this position is not the good position. Why is this position not good to start the test? Because of the fact that the splanchnic circulation is not distributed up to the chest wall. So the first position that you must get is always and always a 45 degrees propped up. So let's say 45 degrees propped up means I need to get 45 degrees propped up. The leg has to be low down. The leg cannot be up. Okay? It has to be a 45 degrees propped up. So it's still now not 45 degrees. Okay, you have to get to 45 degrees. So now I'm getting to 45 degrees. The leg has to be absolutely supine. You cannot have a bed break. Leg has to be absolutely supine. So there is no bed break here. Take 45 degrees further. So this is your first position that you take. Okay, still not 45 degrees. Okay, 45 degrees. Clear? So the position initially that we had was not 45 degrees. The initial position we had was barely around 15 degrees. Now you have a 45 degrees position. Now after you take this 45 degrees position up, you need to look here and see whether this gets stable. Okay, 3.2 or 35, you can take this 3.2. Now 3.2 at this moment is stable. 3.2 is stable over here. It doesn't matter if the patient is breathing, not breathing, patient is on the ventilator, atrial fibrillation, fast ventricular rate. Why nothing? It doesn't matter if there is rhythm disturbance. It doesn't matter if the patient is triggering the ventilator. In this case, for example, the patient is triggering the ventilator. Okay, so it doesn't matter what you're doing. What we are trying to figure out is fluid responsiveness. Now I have kept the patient in this, and I see my high fidelity monitor showing a cardiac output of 3.2. At least for 30 seconds, it has to be stable. At least for 30 seconds. If it is varying 3.2, 3.5, 3.84, then that is not the time to start the PLR. Okay, you don't need the patient to be paralyzed, you don't need the patient to be sedated, you can do it in a patient who is actively breathing only. The only places where you will not want to do it is if there is intra-abdominal hypertension. If there is intra-abdominal hypertension, the mobilization of the splanchnic circulation will not take place. So we can't do it at that time. Okay, clear on this? We cannot do it. We can't do it if you don't have a pico and an echo. You can't do it if you don't have both of those. You have to have one of them for that. Okay, now the entire premise is I want to move this very quickly. I want to move the 150 ml from here and maybe 150 200 ml from here into the cardiac output, into the heart quickly. You can't do it slowly. So it has to be, say, within 10 seconds. Within 10 seconds, the entire volume should go into the heart. And within 30 to 60 seconds, we should see a change in the cardiac output by 10%. 10%. That means 3.3 should become 3.2 should become 0.3 more. That is 3.2 to 3.6. And this should occur quickly. Ideally, it will occur within 10-15 seconds. And then by 30-60 seconds, it gets stable, and then you get it back. Okay? So since you have to do it quickly, one of the things you can do in this case is raise the bed as much as possible higher. Okay, raise the bed as much as up. Okay, notice this per se might be problems with this. Ensure that this goes higher, as high as possible. Why am I doing this as high as possible? Any idea?
The position will be changed. The bed will be tilted downwards.
Yeah, so I'm going to take it as much as possible. This one as high as possible. Okay. Now, one of the things you do at this stage is your infusion pumps will have a problem. So take the bed down. Take the bed down first. Take the bed down. Take the bed down. Okay. Take the bed down. Fair enough? You are there. Now, once you've taken the bed high up as possible, the next thing you do is you start tilting the patient. But first, you assure once more that this is stable. So this is kind of stable. 3.2. It's 3.2. I'm not looking at CVP. I'm not looking at blood pressure because this is pressure. This is flow. This is the only thing that is flow. Okay. I'll just call you back in 2 minutes time. Huh? This is the only thing that's flow. Okay. This is the only thing that's flow. Now what do I do here? Huh? I start tilting the patient. What do I need to do? I need to tilt the patient down to this will become supine, and the legs will then go on top. And I will look for 30 seconds. So I'm going to tilt. The whole bed tilt is there for function. I'm going to use the whole bed tilt for function. Okay, because I will do that. And if it still doesn't happen, then I will raise the legs up and put in pillows. You have the pillows ready? So this has to be done in 10 seconds time. This has to be done in 10 seconds time. Okay, so I'm going to start doing the tilt maneuver. I'm tilting now. Okay, the whole bed is simultaneously tilting. Leg is going up. Now the head is going down. Simultaneous tilt is happening. Correct? So it's around 3 seconds now. It can go a little a certain amount. You can look at the bed down. So you look at right here. You just stop now there. Stop now. Yes. I'm getting the head down. You can get the head down. So it's another 3, 4, 5, 2, 3 seconds happening. Leg is gone down. Head is gone up. The head is gone down. Now, after the head has gone down, the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get this up to 45 degrees. So what do? I put this up under the heel and not under the knee joint. Under the heel. Under the heel and not under the knee joint. Okay. If you put it under the knee joint, it will occlude. It will occlude and it will become stiff. So now I have a 45 degrees tilt. And I'm going to look here. I'm going to look here for the next 10 seconds. Oh, the waveform has gone rewired. Get the waveform right. Just yeah. Okay. So you see the waveform now. A continuous output we see here. It's 3.5. Okay, it's come to 3.5. For 3.2 it was. It has come to 3.5. Now we wait. We are in the first 10 seconds. 15, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 19, 30 seconds we gotta wait. Now 30, 60 seconds. It's not moving. It's not moving. This basically is going on to say that this patient is not fluid responsive. Otherwise, we should have seen in the first 15 seconds itself that this would have moved. This would have gone to 3.7, 3.8, 3.94. That's definitely not occurring, indicating that this patient is probably not fluid responsive. It remains 3.3, 3.4. It has to be more than 10%. It has to be more than. When it goes more than 10%, then we can say that the blood. So here you see the blood pressure has gone up, but we are not looking at pressure. We are looking at flow. It has to be the flow. Now this is Now we are 30 seconds, almost 50 seconds through. Since we are 50 seconds through, we can now abandon the maneuver. It's not really working. So take off, and we'll get back the patient to the position. So I'm getting the head up now, and tilting the bed back to position. So we're tilting the bed back to position. Always when you're doing that, careful of the tubes. Now the tubes might go haywire. Okay. And I'm putting the patient back to the 45 degrees proper position. He's going back to 45. Okay? Where I started at. Always end the maneuver the way you started it. End the maneuver the way you started it. Okay. I go back here and I see the cardiac output is 3.3. It's gone back to where it was. 3.3, 3.2, what we started at is the same. So this means this patient is not fluid responsive. So the entire maneuver is, again I'll tell you, you need a high fidelity monitor that will have that can pick up significant changes of at least 10%. Of that you have to have a PICO. You need to find flows. You don't have to look at pressures. You're looking at flows. You can't look at TPB. You can't look at CVP. You can't look at blood pressure. It has to be cardiac output. So the other way you can do it is by echo. The third thing you can do is by flow track. This is also continuous cardiac output monitor. What we are doing is PICO. Okay, with that we have the cardiac output that's there. You have to move 150 to 300 ml from the splanchnic circulation, that is a high capacitance bed, and the flow bed from here, compliance bed from here, into the heart, and the cardiac output has to improve. It doesn't matter if the patient has got atrial fibrillation, is breathing on his own, spontaneous breathing, or anything like that. But it does matter if you have intra-abdominal hypertension. You can't do that. Yeah. So apart from this, are there any questions on PLR now? So in this case, if the PLR would have been positive, that means if the patient has a requirement of fluid, I can give the fluid. It is not this way that if the PLR is responsive, I need to give the fluid. I need to give the fluid only if the patient demands the fluid. That means you have a drop in the blood pressure, you feel that this patient is hypovolemic. The reason to do a PLR is only to say that if I give the fluid inside, the cardiac output will improve. That's the only thing. It doesn't tell anything more than that. Clear? Any questions on PLR?
How much fluid should we do?
This is what we're doing just now. Then that's a fluid challenge. That becomes fluid challenge. That becomes fluid challenge. 500 to 1000 ml of fluid is what we'll give.
If you want to give more, then again we can.
No, then again, if you want to give more, this is so dynamic. The changes are so dynamic. Today, if now the patient is PLR positive, after 30 minutes he may not be positive. So if you say you have given 500 ml or 1000 ml of fluid, then you come back, because you have the PICO, you can actually do after an hour or something the transpermeable thermodilution, and then it will give you this extravascular lung water here that you have. If you come here, you can actually look here whether that fluid is really, so the end, you have to see the end also, no? So if I see the end over here, for example, I come here and I say I want to see my cardiac output. I open up my cardiac output trace, and here I can see extravascular lung water coming. So it's 7.8, 7.1, 7.5. I can actually see that the extravascular lung water, what has happened to that fluid. So if the fluid had to get into the lungs, this will go up. So I have got the end report also over here saying that the extravascular lung water has gone up. Say it has not gone up, it gives me a reason, okay, to believe maybe does he still require the fluid? That means is the urine output going down, is the capillary refill time not getting better, is the BP not fine? I have to first see all those parameters, which are my end, my perfusion, my lactates are not getting better, my limbs are still very cold and clammy. So I need to first see all those things. That means this patient may require the fluid, but will he respond to the fluid? For that you do again PLR. You understand? Did you do the PLR again? Then again you give the fluid. So it's not. If people say it's a very difficult process to do, it's not difficult. It is very simple. It is very simple. Now, for example, in this case, you are wondering, he's got so many fluids going on, medicines going on. 4.5 NORAD, 2.4 vasopressin, so many other inotropes, vasopressors going on. BP was around 108. My question was whether I want to give the fluid to reduce that vasopressors, because I felt the capillary refill time is a little bit prolonged. But what is found out in this case, that if I do the PLR, the patient is unresponsive, the chances of the patient increasing cardiac output after I give a fluid challenge is negligible. It is not there. So if I give that fluid over here, it will go into the extravascular system. So it's so simple actually. So in this case, if by any chance the patient's BP drops, my next step would be to actually increase somehow the cardiac output or somehow the vasopressors. That is the only thing I can do in this case. I can't give the fluid. Tomorrow the urine output drops, giving the fluid may not be a good idea. Actually, escalating the supports is what I would probably do.
Suppose if the extravascular lung water is already on a very higher side, say around
You can
10.
still do that now.
We can still
do it. So you have to judge that.
Okay.
If the patient at that time is hypotensive, capillary refill time is down, lactates are increasing, he's mottling, something like that is occurring. Then irrespective of the extravascular lung water, I want to improve the cardiac output in the next 1 hour, 2 hours. If I don't, even patient will go down, slide the entire scale, and he will absolutely go down. So that time I want to see if the patient is fluid responsive. If the patient is fluid responsive and the patient deserves the fluid, you give the fluid. It has to be two things. Patient should be fluid responsive and the patient should deserve the fluid. Then only we can give it, otherwise we can't. Clear? Clear? Any questions? Any questions on PLR?
No.
If you cannot do the PLR, then the other step is actually to do tidal volume challenge. Okay. Now here you have pulse pressure variation. You have pulse pressure variation 6 and 7 happening over here. Okay, you have it over here. Pulse pressure variation 6, 7 is there over here. So the second step is I did my PLR. I found that the patient is not responsive. But then I can also do a tidal volume challenge, which is so simple to do again. Just in the same patient that I have, I just increase this is 6 ml per kilogram. I want to make it 8 ml per kilogram. So I will just increase this to 410, 425. I made 8 ml per kilogram, and I'll hit the button to see whether the PPV increases by again 10, 2.5 at least. Okay, so I'm going to press this. I'm going to see what happens here. So we'll see there where it is going up. So is the PPV going up? So we'll see whether tidal volume challenge tells us anything like that. Suppose 8, 9, 7. In fact, it's not going up. It's not going up. In fact, it's not. It has to change. Okay. So obviously it shows that the pulse pressure variation is also not responsive to fluid. So definitely patient is not fluid responsive. That is very, very clear. We did from two tests. One we did from PLR and other we do. So I'm going back to the tidal volume of 325 and we'll see whether that comes back. And that should ideally come back. Oh, anyways, it's like that only. So you have 325, but clearly the PPV is not responsive. The same thing you can do with ETCO2. Same thing you can do with ETCO2. If the ETCO2 goes up by 10%, 2.8, say it becomes 32 or 33. There again it tells you that there is.
By tidal volume.
Yeah, by tidal volume. Same thing you can do by ETCO2. Yeah. Okay, so you have three things over here to actually judge whether you need to give the fluid. It's so simple, provided you do it. And people say it's cumbersome, it is difficult. What is cumbersome in this? There is nothing cumbersome. It is very simple to do a PLR. A PLR gives you an answer. In my opinion, not a single drop of fluid should go in unless the patient is fluid responsive. If the patient is not fluid responsive, you are only harming. It is not going to help. It is only going to harm. It is going to exude. It is going to interstitium. It is going to harm. You know, cumulative fluid balance is known to cause mortality on the higher side. Okay? Any questions? Yes, sir?
No, sir.
Okay.